I was holding a piece of paper that cost me $75, staring at a piece of wood that cost me $12. The paper was a freshly laminated city ordinance citation, courtesy of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, specifically citing a violation of Section 8.c, unapproved auditory disturbances and visual clutter. The piece of wood was a bamboo wind chime. It was small, unassuming, and painted a cheerful, non-threatening shade of green. It had 6 little bamboo tubes that, when caught by a breeze, made a sound like 2 skeletons playing a very gentle, gentrified game of patty cake. It was the least offensive object in the history of human civilization. And yet, across the manicured, demilitarized zone of our shared property line, Brenda was watching me. I didn't have to look to know she was there. I could feel the gaze. It was a physical weight, like a lead vest at the dentist. Brenda didn't just look, she surveilled. She was a woman who measured the height of her fescue with a laser rangefinder. She was the type of person who knew the exact date your car registration expired before the DMV did. I turned slowly. There she was, standing amidst her prize-winning hydrangeas, wearing a floral sun hat that looked suspiciously like a combat helmet disguised with petals. "It's still up, Dave," she called out. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had that piercing, oscillating frequency that could shatter wine glasses and the will to live. I sighed, waving the citation. "I just got the mail, Brenda. I'm reading the literature you sent over. Very professional lamination job, by the way. Did you do this yourself, or does the HOA have a tactical office supplies division?" "Mockery is not a defense, Dave," she said, marching. She never walked, she marched toward the fence. She stopped exactly 2 inches from the property line. Brenda respected boundaries only so she could weaponize them. "That thing is a menace. I couldn't sleep last night. The cacophony was relentless." I looked at the chimes. They were currently motionless. The air was dead still. "Brenda, it's bamboo. It barely makes a sound. A squirrel sneezing is louder than this. It's supposed to be zen. You know, calming, relaxation, concepts you might want to look up on Wikipedia." "It is visual noise," she snapped, pointing a gloved finger at the offending ornament. "And when the wind picks up, it's auditory clutter. It disrupts the natural soundscape of the estates. I have Shih Tzus, Dave. They have sensitive chakras. Barnaby has been hiding under the chaise lounge all morning because of the frequency distortions." "Barnaby hides under the chaise lounge because he's afraid of you, Brenda. We all are." Her eyes narrowed. "You have 24 hours to remove the unpermitted structure, or I call the police for a noise disturbance." "Again." "You called the police because my recycling bin was 3 inches too far from the curb," I reminded her. "It was a hazard to emergency vehicles." "It was a hazard to your sense of symmetry." She turned on her heel, a maneuver that was impressively military, and marched back to her patio doors. 24 hours. I stood there, gripping the citation until the lamination crinkled. I looked at my little bamboo chimes. Clack, clack. A gentle breeze rolled through. It was a nice sound, a human sound. It was the sound of a guy trying to enjoy his porch after working 40 hours a week in a cubicle that smelled like ozone and despair. I wasn't going to take it down. Cut to 26 hours later. I was sitting on my porch steps, coffee in hand, wearing my bathrobe. The chimes were still up. I felt like a rebel, a very tired, suburban Che Guevara. Then, the cruiser pulled up. It wasn't just a patrol car. It was Officer Miller. We were on a first-name basis, mostly because Brenda treated 911 like her personal concierge service. Miller looked like a man who had joined the force to fight crime, save lives, and make a difference, only to end up mediating disputes about shrubbery overhang. He looked exhausted. His mustache drooped with the weight of suburban nonsense. He walked up the driveway, hitching up his belt. He didn't even put his hand on his holster. He just rubbed his temples. "Morning, Dave," Miller sighed. "Morning, Officer Miller. Coffee? I've got a fresh pot. Ethiopian blend. Notes of blueberry and petty grievances." "I can't, Dave. I'm on duty. And frankly, if I have enough caffeine to wake me up right now, I might vibrate into another dimension." He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and gestured vaguely at the porch. She called again. "The psychedelic noise cult?" I asked. "That's the one," Miller said, pulling out his notepad. He didn't write anything. He just looked at it to avoid making eye contact with the universe. "She told dispatch you were operating an unlicensed sonic harassment device. She said it sounded like, and I quote, 'skeletons bowling in a canyon.'" "It's bamboo, Miller. Look at it." We both looked up. The wind chimes swayed silently. "I see it," Miller said. "Dave, look. I know she's particular." "Particular? She measures the decibels of my lawnmower, Miller. She once reported a cloud because she thought it cast a shadow on her solar panels." "I know," Miller said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But she's technically citing City Ordinance 8.c auditory disturbances. It's a catch-all. If a neighbor complains 3 times in a week, we have to issue a citation for non-compliance if the officer deems the noise unnecessary. And buddy, wind chimes are, legally speaking, unnecessary. So is her existence, but I don't call you guys about it," I muttered. From the hedges to our left, a voice screeched. "I heard that! That is a threat! Officer, note that down. He, threatened my existence!" Brenda's head popped up over the laurels like a periscope of doom. She was holding a clipboard. Of course she was. Miller closed his eyes and took a deep breath through his nose. "Ma'am, please, step back inside." "He is refusing to comply," Brenda yelled, waving the clipboard. "That noise! It's mental torture! It's psychological warfare! My property value is plummeting every time that wood clicks against that other wood." Miller looked at me. The look said, "Please, I have a mortgage. I have a wife. I don't want to be here." "Dave," Miller said softly, "just take the damn things down. Is it worth the $75? Is it worth me coming back here tomorrow? Because I will have to come back. She calls the chief directly. She plays bridge with the mayor's wife." I looked at Miller. I looked at the chimes. I looked at Brenda, who was now frantically scribbling on her clipboard, probably drafting a letter to the UN. The fight went out of me. Not because she was right, but because Miller looked so tired. "Fine," I said. I stood up, reached up, and unhooked the bamboo chimes. "Ha!" Brenda shrieked. "Victory for the bylaws! Victory for peace!" I held the chimes in my hand. They felt light, defeated. "Thank you, Dave," Miller said, visibly relaxing. "Have a good day. Try to keep it quiet." "Yeah," I said. "Quiet." Miller walked back to his car. Brenda watched him go, then turned her gaze back to me. She offered a smug, tight-lipped smile, the kind of smile a shark gives before it eats a seal. "Next time, check the handbook, Dave," she called out. "Page 42. Prohibited exterior ornamentation. Save yourself the embarrassment." She disappeared behind her hedge. I stood there for a long time. The silence of the neighborhood was heavy. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a suppressed silence, a regulated silence. It was the silence of a place where joy was subject to committee approval. I walked inside and threw the bamboo chimes into the trash. I didn't want chimes anymore. Chimes were weak. Chimes were for people who wanted to coexist. I didn't want to coexist. I wanted war. But to win a war against a bureaucrat, you don't use weapons. You use paperwork. I went to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and cracked my knuckles. Page 42, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see what else is in that handbook. For the next 48 hours, I did not sleep. I did not shower. I existed on a diet of spite and espresso. My dining room table looked like the frantic wall of a detective trying to catch the Zodiac killer. But instead of grainy photos and red string, I had printouts of the Oakwood Estates HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, the city municipal code, the county zoning laws, and 3 empty bags of Doritos. The text was dense. It was boring. It was written by lawyers who hated the human soul. But I read every single word. I read about fence heights. I read about grass varietals. I read about the acceptable Pantone shades for mailbox flags. Standard red only, no neon or infrared. Brenda was right about the chimes. Section 8C was ironclad regarding wind-actuated ornamentation. If it moved by wind and made sound, it was subject to neighbor approval. She had me there. But rules are like Swiss cheese. The solid parts are hard to chew, but the holes are where the flavor is. I hit a wall around 3:00 a.m. on Tuesday. I was about to give up. I was about to resign myself to a life of silence, listening only to the sound of Brenda yelling at her gardener. Then I saw it. I was deep in the city municipal code, subsection 44, looking for regulations on bird baths. I had briefly considered installing a bird bath that was actually a high-powered fountain aimed at her patio, when my eyes drifted to Ordinance 44. B. Cultural and artistic structures. I leaned in. The blue light of the laptop screen illuminated my manic grin. In the interest of promoting cultural diversity and the arts, the ordinance read, fixed musical structures and instruments of historical or cultural significance shall be exempt from standard noise decibel limitations, Section 8.c, provided they are professionally installed, permanently affixed to the ground, and serve an educational, artistic, or religious function. I froze. I reread it. Exempt from standard noise decibel limitations. I scrolled down. There was a specific list of examples of cultural instruments, pipe organs, steam whistles for historical trains. And there, right between calliopes and gongs, was the Holy Grail. Carillons. I blinked. Carillons. I opened a new tab and Googled Carillon definition. A musical instrument that is typically housed in the bell tower, belfry of a church or municipal building. The instrument consists of at least 23 cast bronze, cup-shaped bells, which are played serially to play a melody. Bells. Big bells. The kind of bells that signaled the invasion of Vikings. The kind of bells that told peasants it was time to pray or flee the plague. I sat back in my chair. The silence of the house was suddenly filled with the phantom ringing of bronze. I looked at my renovation savings account. I had spent 5 years saving up for a new kitchen. I wanted a farmhouse sink. I wanted quartz countertops. I wanted an island with a built-in wine fridge. It was a healthy sum, enough to make a kitchen look like it belonged in a magazine. Or enough to buy a weapon of mass percussion. Some men buy Ferraris during a midlife crisis. Some men have affairs. I was about to buy a 2-ton instrument to ruin a woman's afternoon tea. I spent the next 6 hours on the weirdest corners of eBay and specialized architectural salvage sites. It turns out there's a surprisingly robust market for used church bells. Churches close down, they renovate, they go digital. And what happens to the bells? They sit in warehouses in Ohio, waiting for a lunatic like me. I found it at 6:00 a.m. Item: restored, 1958. Verdun Company Carillon. Bell set, 12 bells. Origin: decommissioned chapel, Pennsylvania. Condition: vintage patina. Excellent tone. Weight: approx. 3,800 pounds total. Price: make offer. It wasn't a full 23-bell Carillon, but 12 bells was enough for a chromatic scale. It was enough to play melodies. It was enough to play everything. I clicked buy it now. Then I realized I needed a permit. The ordinance said professionally installed and permanently affixed. If I just hung these from a tree, Brenda would win. I needed a structure. I needed a tower. I showered, put on my best sane citizen clothes, a polo shirt and khakis, and drove to City Hall. The clerk of the court was a woman named Janice. She looked like she had been stamping forms since the Nixon administration. She didn't look up when I approached the glass partition. "Number?" she mumbled. "I don't have a number, Janice, but I have a vision," I said, sliding the printed Ordinance 44.B across the counter. She looked at the paper. She looked at me. She adjusted her glasses. "You want to build a what?" "A cultural auditory art installation," I said, using the specific verbiage I had rehearsed. Specifically, a kinetic wind and solenoid-actuated bronze percussion tower. A carillon. Janice squinted. "In a residential zone? Sir, usually people just build pergolas, or she-sheds." "It is a pergola," I lied smoothly. "Structurally speaking, it just happens to have a roof capable of supporting 4,000 pounds of bronze. And it has a cultural purpose, which is the preservation of analog signaling in a digital age," I improvised. "It's educational, for the children. They don't know what bells sound like anymore, Janice. They only know iPhone notifications. It's a tragedy." Janice stared at me for a long, long time. I held my breath. She looked at the ordinance. She looked at her computer. "Well," she said, "the code doesn't say you can't, but you need a structural engineer to sign off on the foundation, and it has to be set back 10 feet from the property line." "I have 12 feet, I said. "I measured. And the height restriction is 25 feet. I'm aiming for 24 feet, 6 inches. Janice sighed. She stamped a form. "Thief chunk." "You need a licensed contractor," she said, handing me the paper. "This isn't a DIY job, honey. If a 200-pound bell falls on a trick-or-treater, the city isn't liable. You are." "Understood," I said, taking the permit like it was the Declaration of Independence. "Thank you, Janice. You're a patriot." "I'm a bureaucrat with 10 minutes until lunch," she corrected. "Next." I walked out of City Hall into the blinding sunlight. I had the bells. Shipping confirmation had just hit my phone. I had the permit. Now I just needed someone crazy enough to build it. I needed a builder who didn't ask why, but asked how loud. I needed a Sal. Finding a contractor to renovate a bathroom is hard. Finding a contractor to build a reinforced steel and concrete bell tower in a suburban driveway is impossible. I spent Wednesday calling every general contractor on Yelp. The conversations all went the same way. Hi, I need to pour a deep foundation and erect a steel frame. Okay, for a garage? No, for a bell tower. Click. Or, a bell tower? Like, for a church? No, for my house. It's for spite. Sir, I do drywall. Good luck. By Thursday, I was getting desperate. The bells were on a flatbed truck somewhere in Ohio, hurtling toward me at 60 miles per hour. I needed a hole in the ground. Then, I found a listing in the back of a free local newspaper at the gas station. It wasn't a glossy ad. It was a black and white box that just said, Sal's Heavy Construction and Demolition. We dig holes, we pour concrete, we break stuff. No questions asked. I dialed the number. Sal's, a voice grunted. It sounded like the voice belonged to a man who gargled gravel and diesel fuel. Hi, Sal. I have a unique project. I need a reinforced foundation capable of supporting a dynamic load of 4,000 pounds, suspended 20 feet in the air. And I need it done by next week. There was a pause. I heard the sound of a lighter flicking and a deep inhale. You burying a tank? Sal asked. No, I'm hanging bells. Bells? Big bells. Church bells. You starting a cult? No, I'm fighting a neighbor. There was a longer pause, then a low, raspy chuckle that sounded like a cement mixer starting up. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sal arrived in a truck that looked like it had survived a demolition derby. It was a Ford F-350 that was more rust than paint, with a bumper sticker that read, I brake for nothing. Sal himself was a mountain of a man. He was about 6'4", wearing work boots that looked like they were made of concrete, and a neon yellow vest that was struggling to contain his torso. He had a mustache that made Officer Miller's look like a smudge. He stepped out of the truck, slammed the door, which rattled the entire chassis, and walked up my driveway. He didn't look at me. He looked at the house. He looked at the driveway. He looked at the property line. You Dave? He asked, chewing on a toothpick. I'm Dave. Where's the enemy? I pointed to the hedge. Brenda. She's in there. Probably listening. Sal nodded. He walked over to the spot I had marked out with spray paint. He stomped on the ground. Thud, thud. Clay soil, Sal said. Gonna need deep pilings, helical piers. Otherwise, when those bells swing, this whole tower is gonna wobble like a drunk freshman. Can we do it? Sal looked at me. His eyes were hidden behind dirty safety glasses. Kid, I poured the foundation for the strip club off I-95 in 3 days. I can build a tower. The question is, how much do you hate this lady? She reported my wind chimes, I said. She called them visual noise. Sal spit the toothpick out. Wind chimes? The little tinkly ones? Yes. That's petty, Sal said. He shook his head. I hate petty. If you're gonna have a feud, have a feud. This? He gestured to the spray paint. This is war. I respect that. He pulled a crumpled tape measure from his belt. All right. We need 4 steel I-beams. We anchor 'em 6 feet down, cross-bracing here and here. We cap it with a custom steel grid to hang the bells. You want a roof? The permit says it needs to be a pergola style, I said. Right, pergola. We'll throw some cedar slats on top. Make it look fancy. But the bones will be industrial grade. You could land a helicopter on it. Just then, the bushes rustled. Excuse me! Sal and I both turned. Brenda was peering through a gap in the laurels. Her radar had detected the presence of a commercial vehicle. "Who is this?" she demanded, pointing a gardening trowel at Sal. "And why is there a rust bucket truck blocking the view of the street?" Sal looked down at her. He didn't move. He just crossed his arms, his biceps bulging like cantaloupes. "Name's Sal, lady. I'm the artist." Brenda blinked. "The... what?" "The artist," Sal grunted. "I'm here to install the kinetic sculpture Dave commissioned. It's very avant-garde." "Sculpture?" Brenda looked at me, suspicion radiating off her in waves. "What kind of sculpture?" "It's a celebration of heaviness," I said. Brenda scoffed. "Well, make sure you don't damage my hydrangeas, and keep the noise down. I'm hosting a book club on Tuesday." She disappeared back into the greenery. Sal watched the bush for a second, then turned back to me. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. "Book club on Tuesday?" Sal asked. "Apparently." "Good," Sal said. He pulled out his phone. "I can get the pile driver here by Monday morning. We'll be hammering the steel beams into the earth right about the time they start discussing The Great Gatsby." "Is the pile driver loud?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Sal laughed. It was a deep, guttural sound. "Kid, a pile driver is a 2-ton hammer dropping on a steel beam every 3 seconds. It sounds like a T-Rex having a tantrum. It'll knock the porcelain cats off her shelves." "Perfect," I said. "How much?" "For the labor? 15 grand. For the materials? Another 10. I did the math. It was the entire kitchen budget. All of it. No island. No wine fridge. I would be cooking on a hot plate for 5 years. I looked at the hedge. I thought about the wind chimes in the trash. I thought about the look on Brenda's face when she told me to check page 42. "You take checks?" I asked. Sal slapped me on the shoulder, nearly dislocating it. "I take cash, checks, or unmarked gold bars. Let's build a monster." We shook hands. His hand felt like a baseball mitt made of sandpaper. "One thing," Sal said, walking back to his truck. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. You don't just want bells. You want resonance." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Sal said, opening his truck door, "I know a guy who sells industrial solenoids, electronic strikers. You don't want to be out here pulling ropes like Quasimodo. You want to run this thing from your phone. You want to be sitting on your toilet, hit a button, and unleash hell." My eyes went wide. "That's possible?" "Anything is possible with enough voltage," Sal said. "I'll make the call. You just clear the driveway. Monday morning, 7:00 a.m. It's gonna get loud." He fired up the truck. A cloud of black smoke erupted from the exhaust, drifting directly over Brenda's fence. I heard a muffled cough and a shriek of indignation from the other side. Sal winked at me, shifted into gear, and rumbled away. I stood in the driveway, looking at the spray paint marks, the outline of the tower. I pulled out my phone and opened the Amazon app. I searched for earplugs, bulk pack. I ordered a box of 500. Then I searched for gift basket, apology. I sent one to the nice neighbors, Tom and Sarah, 3 doors down. The card read, "Forgive me for what I must do. It's for the greater good, Dave." I didn't send one to Brenda. Instead, I went inside, opened a beer, and waited for Monday. Monday morning arrived like a hangover, but I was sober. I was drunk on anticipation. I stood in my driveway at 6:45 a.m., holding a mug of coffee that said, "World's okayest employee." The sun was just cresting over the perfectly manicured horizon of Oakwood Estates. The birds were singing. The sprinklers were tisk, tisk, tisking. It was a symphony of suburban boredom. Then the ground shook. It started as a low rumble, like an indigestion deep in the earth's crust. Then it became a roar. Then a large yellow monster turned the corner onto Maple Drive. Sal had not lied. It was a pile driver. For the uninitiated, a pile driver is not a subtle machine. It is essentially a tank mated with a guillotine. It was followed by a cement mixer, a flatbed truck carrying steel I-beams that looked like they belonged on the Golden Gate Bridge, and Sal's pickup, which was blasting AC/DC's Thunderstruck at a volume that rivaled the actual thunder of God. They parked, or rather they occupied. My driveway ceased to be a driveway. It became a forward operating base. Sal jumped out of his truck, looking like a kid on Christmas morning if Santa brought heavy ordnance instead of toys. "Morning, Dave," he bellowed over the idling diesel engines. "Smell that? That's the smell of progress." "It smells like diesel and impending lawsuits," I shouted back. "Same thing." Sal whistled, and his crew, 3 guys who all looked like they were carved out of granite, swarmed the property. Within 10 minutes, they had set up a perimeter fence, not a nice white picket fence, but that orange plastic construction fencing that screams danger. At 7:05 a.m., the first hammer dropped. Clang. The sound wasn't just loud, it was physical. It felt like someone had slapped me in the chest. Clang! I looked toward Brenda's house. The curtains in her master bedroom flew open. I saw her face pressed against the glass, her mouth open in a silent scream. Clang! Sal walked over to me, grinning. "We gotta drive these pilings 20 feet down. We're hitting bedrock. This tower ain't moving, Dave. If a tornado hits this neighborhood, the only thing left standing will be your bells." "How long will this take?" I asked, wincing as the hammer dropped again. 3 days, Sal said. "Maybe 4. Depends on how hard the dirt fights back." By 8:00 a.m., the neighborhood Facebook group was melting down. I watched the notifications roll in on my phone like a slot machine jackpot. Karen B., Brenda. "There is industrial equipment on Maple Drive. My china is rattling. Calling the police." Tom from number 42. "Is Dave building a bunker?" Sarah. P. "My cat just ran into a wall." By 9:00 a.m., Officer Miller was back. He didn't even park in the driveway this time. He couldn't. A crane was currently blocking the fire hydrant. Miller parked in the middle of the street, turned on his lights, but not his siren, thank God, and walked over. He looked like he had aged 10 years since Friday. "Dave," Miller said, shouting to be heard over the pile driver. "Officer Miller," I yelled cheerfully. "Nice to see you. Do you have ear protection? OSHA regulations say, 'Cut the crap, Dave.'" Miller rubbed his face. "What is this? Brenda says you're fracking. Are you fracking?" "I am not fracking, Miller. I am building a cultural art installation." I pulled the permit out of my back pocket. It was now in a plastic sleeve to protect it from the concrete dust. I handed it to him. Miller squinted at it. He read it. He read it again. He looked at the pile driver, which was currently rhythmically destroying the peace of the morning. Clang, clang, clang. "A pergola," Miller shouted. "This permit says pergola structure." "It's a very robust pergola," I said, "for heavy vines. Wisteria. You know how heavy wisteria gets." "Dave, there are steel I-beams here. You could hang a tank from this." "It's for the birds, Miller," I gestured wildly. "It's a sanctuary. Big birds. Endangered ones. They need sturdy roosts." Brenda appeared at the edge of the orange fencing. She was wearing a silk robe and wielding her phone like a dagger. "Arrest him!" she screamed. "He is shaking the foundation of my house. My Hummel figurines are migrating across the mantle." Sal killed the engine on the pile driver. The sudden silence was deafening. "Ma'am," Sal said, leaning on a shovel. "We are conducting permitted construction work during authorized city hours. 7 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Check the code." "I know the code!" Brenda shrieked. "This is excessive. This is malice." "It's engineering," Sal corrected. "You want the structure to collapse on your hydrangeas?" "No. So let us work. Safety first." Miller handed the permit back to me. He looked defeated. "It's legal," Miller told Brenda. "He has the permits, the zoning sign-off, the structural engineering stamp. There's nothing I can do unless he works past 5 o'clock p.m. Brenda looked at Miller with betrayal in her eyes. "You're letting him build a skyscraper in his driveway because he has a piece of paper?" "It's a nice piece of paper," I added helpfully. Miller turned to me. "Dave, just tell me. What is it really? Because if I come back here and find out you're building a missile silo, I'm going to be very upset." "It's art, Miller. Just art." Miller sighed. "If I get one call at 5:01 p.m., I'm shutting you down." "Understood," I said. Miller left. Brenda stood there for a moment, glaring at the steel beams rising from the earth. "You won't get away with this," she hissed. "I'm just improving the neighborhood, Brenda," I said, "raising property values through culture." She stormed off. "All right, break's over," Sal yelled. "Fire it up." Clang. The next 3 days were a blur of dust, noise, and beautiful petty progress. The tower rose quickly. It wasn't a delicate thing. It was a brutalist masterpiece. 4 thick steel columns rose 25 feet into the air, cross-braced with iron bars. It looked less like a garden feature and more like an oil rig. Sal and his crew worked with terrifying efficiency. They poured the concrete footing, a massive block of gray sludge that would probably survive a nuclear war. They welded the crossbeams, sending sparks cascading down like fireworks. Brenda spent the entire time on her patio, filming us. I waved every time she pointed the camera at me. On Wednesday, the roof went on. Sal had made good on his promise to make it look somewhat like a pergola. He attached some cedar slats to the top. It was like putting a lace doily on a tank. It didn't hide the nature of the beast, but it technically fulfilled the aesthetic requirements of the HOA. By Friday afternoon, the structure was complete. It stood 24 feet, 6 inches high. It was black steel and raw cedar. It cast a long, menacing shadow that stretched perfectly across Brenda's sunbathing chair. Sal slapped the side of one of the beams. It rang with a dull, solid thud. "That ain't going nowhere," Sal said. "You could park a Buick on top of this thing." "It's beautiful, Sal," I said, wiping a tear of dust from my eye. "The bells get here tomorrow," Sal said, checking his clipboard. "Saturday delivery. We install 'em, wire 'em up, and you're live by Sunday." "No," I said. "Not Sunday. We wait." "Wait? Sunday is the Lord's Day," I said piously, "and Brenda goes to brunch until 1 o'clock p.m. I want her home. We launch Saturday morning, 9 o'clock a.m. sharp." Sal grinned. "You're a sick man, Dave." "I'm a focused man, Sal." That night, the tower stood silent in the moonlight. It looked ominous. It looked waiting. I went to sleep, but I dreamed of bronze. The flatbed truck arrived at 8 o'clock a.m. on Saturday. If the construction had been a disruption, the delivery was a spectacle. The truck was so long it had to back down the street from the main road. The neighbors came out of their houses. People were walking their dogs, stopping to stare. Kids on bikes gathered at the end of the driveway. On the back of the truck, strapped down with heavy chains, sat the choir. 12 bells. They were not the shiny golden bells you see in cartoons. These were old. They were covered in a green-black oxidation, the patina of 50 years of Pennsylvania winters. They looked heavy. They looked like they had seen things. The largest one, the tenor bell, which Sal had affectionately named Big Bertha, was the size of a small jacuzzi. "Mother of God," whispered Tom, my nice neighbor from 3 doors down. He had walked over with his golden retriever, Buster. Buster was currently trembling. "Morning, Tom," I said, signing the delivery manifesto. "Dave," Tom said, staring at the bells. What is that?" "That, Tom, is a 1958 Verdun Carillon. Cast bronze. It's a musical instrument." "It looks like unexploded ordnance," Tom said. "It's cultural, Tom. I'm bringing culture to the cul-de-sac." "Is this about Brenda?" Tom asked. Everyone knew about Brenda. Brenda had once reported Tom because his Christmas lights were blinking at an aggressive tempo. "It's always about Brenda," I admitted. Sal pulled up in the crane. A real crane this time. Not a little boom lift, but a massive hydraulic beast capable of lifting a house. The installation process was like a military operation. Sal's crew rigged Big Bertha first. As the crane engine whined, the massive bell lifted into the air. It swung slowly, majestically, rotating in the morning sun. Brenda came out. She was wearing her bathrobe and holding a cup of coffee. She dropped the cup. It shattered on her patio pavers. She ran to the fence. "What is that? What is in the sky?" "It's a bell, Brenda," I shouted happily. "For the birdhouse. It's a feeding bell." "That is a church bell," she screamed. "You are building a cathedral. You can't build a cathedral. The zoning doesn't allow for religious institutions." "It's secular," I yelled back. "It's for the arts." She ran inside, presumably to call the Pope. One by one, the bells were hoisted up and bolted into the steel grid Sal had constructed. The sound of metal on metal rang out, a preview of the sonic violence to come. By noon, they were all up. 12 bells, hanging in a graduated row, looming over the fence. They looked like batons of judgment. Then came the wiring. Sal's guy, a frantic electrician named Sparks, I never learned his real name, spent 4 hours running thick black cables from the solenoids, little magnetic pistons attached to the side of each bell, down the tower and into my garage. "Okay," Sparks said, wiping grease on his forehead. "This is a custom job. High-voltage strikers. When you hit the button, the piston slams the bell. It's cleaner than a clapper. Faster. You can play 16th notes on this thing if you're crazy enough." He handed me an iPad. It was connected to a black box that hummed with menace. "I loaded the app," Sparks said. "It's basically a piano interface. You press a key, a bell rings. There's also a sequencer if you want to program songs." "Does it have volume control?" Tom asked, still lingering by the driveway. "No," Sal said, lighting a cigar. "Bells have 2 volumes, off and God is coming." I held the iPad. My hands were shaking. "Test it," Sal said. "Give us a ding." I looked at the screen. I pressed the key for middle C. Dung! It wasn't just a sound. It was a concussion. The air in the driveway compressed. I felt it in my teeth. The sound bloomed, expanding outward in a perfect sphere of bronze resonance. It rolled down the street. It bounced off the houses. It lingered for a solid 10 seconds, a rich, complex hum that refused to die. Birds took flight from trees 3 blocks away. A car alarm went off down the street. Brenda's back door slammed shut. Sal closed his eyes and inhaled the cigar smoke. That's the stuff. That's G-flat. Big Bertha has a nice throat. It's loud, Tom said, taking a step back. Dave, that's really loud. It's within the frequency of cultural expression, Tom, I said, my ears ringing slightly. When do you unleash it? Sal asked. I looked at the iPad. I looked at the silent, brooding house of my enemy. Tomorrow, I said. 9:01 a.m., 1 minute past the noise ordinance cutoff. Sal clapped his hands. I'll bring donuts. I want to watch the show. I spent the rest of the evening in my garage, programming. I didn't want to play live. I might miss a note. I needed perfection. I needed a playlist that told a story. I dragged MIDI files into the sequencer. I adjusted the tempo. I set the velocity to max. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. Enjoy it, Brenda, I thought. This is the last quiet morning of your life. Saturday morning. The sky was a cruel, cloudless blue. At 8:45 a.m., Sal arrived. He brought a lawn chair, a cooler of sodas, and a box of donuts. He set up camp in my driveway, positioning himself for the best line of sight to Brenda's bedroom window. At 8:50 a.m., Tom came out to water his lawn. He saw us. He saw the iPad in my hand. He immediately turned off his hose, went back inside, and closed all his blinds. Smart man. At 8:55 a.m., I stepped onto the porch. I felt like a conductor stepping onto the podium at the Philharmonic. I was wearing my noise-canceling headphones. Sony, top of the line. I checked the time. 8:58 a.m. I looked at Brenda's house. It was silent, peaceful. I imagined her in there, sipping her herbal tea, perhaps reading a magazine about sustainable composting, completely unaware that the apocalypse was parked 12 feet away. 8:59 a.m. I unlocked the iPad. The app, Bell Commander Pro, glowed on the screen. 9:00 a.m. Technically, I could start now, but I was a gentleman. I would give her the minute of grace. 9:01 a.m. I took a deep breath. I looked at Sal. He gave me a thumbs up, a donut hanging from his mouth. Alexa, I whispered, though Alexa wasn't involved. Engage protocol, shark. I pressed play. The first note hit the neighborhood like a physical blow. Dong, 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 dong. Big Bertha and her 11 sisters swung into action. The solenoids fired with machine gun precision. It was Baby Shark, but not the cute, poppy version you hear on YouTube. This was Baby Shark played on 4,000 pounds of Gothic bronze. It sounded ominous. It sounded like a funeral dirge for a giant sea monster. Baby Shark, do, 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 do. The sound was so loud it distorted my vision. I could see the glass in my own front windows vibrating. My shark, do, 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 do. At the third bar, Brenda's back door flew open. She didn't walk out. She exploded out. She was wearing pajamas and a sleep mask that was pushed up onto her forehead. She looked like a startled owl. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Or rather, sound did come out, but it was instantly swallowed, chewed up, and spit out by the bells. Dong, 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 dong. She covered her ears. She fell to her knees. It was biblical. I swiped to the next track. The Imperial March, Darth Vader's theme. This was where the lower bells really shone. The rhythm was heavy, militaristic. Dum, 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 dum da dum, dum da dum. The ground actually shook. I saw dust rising from the hydrangeas. Brenda scrambled to her feet. She ran to the fence. She was screaming, her face purple, veins bulging in her neck. She was shaking the lattice fence like a prisoner in a riot. "Stop!" I could see her mouth the word. "Stop it!" I couldn't hear her. I just smiled and pointed to my watch. "It's after 9, Brenda. Legal hours." She grabbed a garden gnome and hurled it at the tower. It bounced harmlessly off one of the steel I-beams and shattered. Sal was laughing so hard he fell out of his lawn chair. He was slapping the driveway pavement, tears streaming down his face. I ramped up the tempo. Flight of the Bumblebee. This was the technical masterpiece. The solenoids fired rapidly, a blur of metallic strikes. Ding, 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 ding. It was a frantic, chaotic swarm of noise. It was anxiety in sonic form. The sheer speed of the strikes created a wall of sound that was impenetrable. It was a weaponized wall of sound. Brenda turned and ran back toward her house, but she didn't go inside. She ran to her car. She fumbled with her keys, dropped them, picked them up, and dove into her Lexus. She started the car, but she didn't leave. She just sat there, windows rolled up, hands over her ears. But the bells didn't care about Lexus soundproofing. The bells were existential. They permeated the chassis. Suddenly, the cul-de-sac filled with blue lights. Officer Miller. He must have been parked around the corner, waiting for the inevitable. He pulled up, 3 squad cars deep. It looked like a raid. I saw him get out. He slammed his door, but I didn't hear it. He walked toward me, his face a mask of grim determination. He was shouting something. I paused the playlist. The silence that followed was heavy. It rushed back into the vacuum left by the bells, leaving everyone dizzy. My ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine. Miller was screaming at me from 5 feet away. "Dave, turn it off!" I took off my headphones. "Good morning, officer. Just conducting a system test." Miller marched up the steps. He looked like he wanted to tase me. He looked like he wanted to tase the tower. "System test!" Miller yelled, his voice cracking. "Dave, they got calls from the next town over. The dispatch center thought it was an air raid. The mayor called me. The mayor is in the shower, Dave, and he said his soap dish vibrated off the shelf." "It's the acoustics," I said, nodding sagely. "The cloud cover is low today. It traps the sound." Brenda had emerged from her car. She walked toward us. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was trembling. She looked shell-shocked. "Arrest him," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "Take him away. Execute him. I don't care. Just make the metal monster stop." "I can't arrest him, Brenda," Miller shouted, clearly still deafened. "He has the permit." "The permit is for art," Brenda shrieked, finding her second wind. "That wasn't art. That was Baby Shark. That is a war crime." "It's a folk song," I interjected. "A sea shanty of the modern era." "This ends now," Miller said, pointing a finger at my chest. "I don't care about the ordinance. I'm citing you for disturbing the peace. I'm citing you for public nuisance. I'm citing you for inciting a riot. Look at the neighbors." I looked. The entire street was out. But they weren't rioting. They were laughing. Tom was filming on his phone, giving a thumbs up. The kids on bikes were cheering. "They seem entertained," I said. "I am confiscating the iPad," Miller said, holding out his hand. "Hand over the weapon, Dave." I clutched the iPad to my chest. "You can't do that. This is the conductor's baton. Hand it over, or I impound the bells. And I don't have a tow truck big enough for that, so I'll just shoot the solenoids." Miller's hand was on his gun. He wasn't serious. Probably. But the look in his eye was desperate. I looked at Brenda. She was vibrating. Her hair was disheveled. She looked broken. I looked at the tower. It stood tall, triumphant against the sky. I had won. I had dropped a sonic nuke on the HOA. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I handed Miller the iPad. "But," I said, raising a finger, "I have terms." Miller looked at the iPad, then at me. "You're in no position for terms, Dave." "Oh, I think I am, because tomorrow is Sunday, and if I don't have that iPad, I might have to ring them manually, with a hammer. And I'm not very good at keeping time. It might go on for hours." Brenda let out a small whimper. "What do you want?" Brenda asked. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a crumpled, coffee-stained object, the original bamboo wind chime. "I want to hang this up," I said. "Right here, on the porch. And I want you to sign a document stating that this wind chime constitutes essential cultural heritage and is exempt from all future complaints." Brenda stared at the bamboo. Then she stared at the 3-ton tower of doom behind me. She looked at the bamboo. She looked at the tower. "The bamboo," she whispered. "I'll take the bamboo." "And you drop the complaints about the recycling bin?" "Yes." "And you stop measuring my grass?" "Yes, just unplug the tower, please." I smiled. It was the smile of a man who had spent $25,000 to win a $12 argument. "Deal." I turned to Sal. "Cut the power, Sal." Sal sighed, disappointed. I had Freebird queued up next. "Save it for the holidays," I said. Sal walked over to the breaker box and flipped the switch. The hum of the solenoids died. The tower went dormant. The silence returned to Oakwood Estates. But it was different now. It wasn't the silence of oppression. It was the silence of a ceasefire. Miller handed me a citation anyway. "Disorderly conduct, $50. "Worth it," I said. Brenda turned and walked back to her house. She walked slowly. She didn't march. She slumped. I hung the bamboo chime back on its hook. A gentle breeze caught it. Tink, tink, clack. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. The silence that followed the Battle of the Bells was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears, a phantom echo of Baby Shark haunting the subconscious of the entire cul-de-sac. Officer Miller had left with my iPad in an evidence bag, but not before issuing a stern warning that if he heard so much as a cowbell before Monday, he would authorize a SWAT raid. Brenda had retreated into her fortress. Her blinds were drawn. Her house looked like it was sulking. I sat on my porch steps, staring at the dark, brooding silhouette of the bell tower. It was dormant now, a sleeping giant. "So," Sal said, breaking the silence. He was still eating donuts, unbothered by the fact that he had just been an accomplice to a sonic assault. "We tearing it down?" "Not yet," I said. "We have leverage, Sal. You don't dismantle the nuke until the treaty is signed." "Smart," Sal nodded. "Mutually assured destruction. I like it. You want me to leave the generator here, just in case?" "Leave it." Sunday was tense. The neighborhood was walking on eggshells. People walked their dogs on the other side of the street, casting fearful glances at the tower. Tom, from 3 doors down, waved at me, but it was a hesitant wave, the kind you give to a neighbor who might be a supervillain. On Monday morning, the lawyers arrived. Brenda didn't come alone. She hired a man named Arthur P. Sterling, a lawyer who looked like he cost $500 an hour and smelled like expensive cologne and litigation. He wore a suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. I didn't have a lawyer. I had Sal. Sal stood next to me in his neon vest, cleaning his fingernails with a screwdriver. It was a power move. We met in my driveway, in the shadow of Big Bertha. "Mr. Dave," Sterling began, opening a leather briefcase on the hood of Sal's rusted truck. He tried not to touch the rust. "My client, Ms. Brenda, is prepared to offer a settlement regarding the unpermitted structure." "It's permitted," I corrected. "I have the papers." "The structure is permitted," Sterling conceded, adjusting his glasses. "The usage, however, constitutes a tortious interference with the quiet enjoyment of the property. We are prepared to sue for distress, hearing loss, and the emotional trauma inflicted on her Shih Tzus." "And I said, leaning against the truck, "am prepared to schedule a daily concert series. I'm thinking of exploring the genre of industrial techno, very bass-heavy. 7 o'clock a.m. sharp, every day." Sterling looked at the tower. He looked at the massive bronze bells. He looked at Sal, who cracked his knuckles. "We want the tower gone," Sterling said, cutting to the chase. "I want the wind chimes," I countered. "The bamboo ornament?" "The bamboo instrument," I corrected. "And I want immunity, total immunity." I pulled out a document I had drafted the night before. It was titled The Treaty of Maple Drive. I had used a very fancy font. "Here are the terms," I said, handing it to Sterling. He read it aloud, his voice dripping with disdain. "Clause 1. The party of the first part, Dave, agrees to dismantle the Carillon Tower and cease all heavy metallurgical percussion. Clause 2. The party of the second part, Brenda, agrees to acknowledge that the bamboo wind chime, Exhibit A, is a protected cultural artifact. Clause 3. Brenda shall never, under any circumstances, measure, inspect, or comment upon the length of Dave's grass, the placement of his recycling bins, or the color of his mailbox flag. Clause 4. Brenda admits in writing that the wind chimes sound pleasant and zen." Sterling paused. "Clause 4 is pushing it." "Clause 4 is non-negotiable," I said. "I need her to admit it." Sterling looked at Brenda. Brenda was standing by her hedge, wearing oversized sunglasses to hide the bags under her eyes. She looked defeated. She looked at the tower. "Just sign it, Arthur," she croaked. "Ms. Brenda, as your legal counsel, I must advise—" "Sign it!" she shrieked. "I can still hear the sharks. Do. It's in my head. Make it stop." Sterling sighed. He pulled out a gold fountain pen. "We need a notary," Sterling said. "Way ahead of you," I said. I waved to the street. Officer Miller was sitting in his cruiser, eating a bagel. I had called him earlier. Miller was technically a notary public. Miller walked up. He looked tired. He looked like he just wanted this to be over so he could go back to arresting teenagers for skateboarding. "You guys agree to this?" Miller asked, looking at the napkin-quality treaty I had drafted. "Yes," Brenda whispered. "Yes," I said. Miller stamped it. Th-chunk! The sound of the stamp was the sweetest sound I had heard all week. It was the sound of victory. "It is done," Miller said. "Now, Dave, get that monstrosity out of my precinct." "Pleasure doing business with you, Brenda," I said, extending a hand. She didn't shake it. She just looked at the tower one last time, shuddered, and walked back into her house. "Arthur," she called back over her shoulder. "Send him the bill for the therapy." "I'm not paying that," I yelled. "We'll discuss it in arbitration," Sterling yelled back, snapping his briefcase shut and fleeing the scene. I turned to Sal. "Well," I said. "We won." Sal looked at the tower. He looked a little sad. "It's a shame," Sal said. We built a good tower, Dave. Solid. That welding was top tier. It was, Sal. It was. You sure you don't want to play one last song? We Are the Champions? Highway to Hell? I looked at the iPad, which Miller had returned to me as part of the peace deal. No, I said. The threat was enough. Silence is the loudest noise of all. The deconstruction took 2 days. It was a melancholy affair. The neighborhood came out to watch, but this time the mood was different. It wasn't fear. It was almost respect. As Sal's crane lowered Big Bertha to the ground, Tom walked over. "I'm gonna miss it," Tom said unexpectedly. "Really?" I asked. "You were terrified of it." "Yeah," Tom laughed. "But for 24 hours, Brenda didn't complain about my trash cans. She was too distracted. It was the most peaceful weekend of my life." "You're welcome, Tom." Sal bought the bells back from me. He gave me scrap value, which meant I lost about $15,000 on the whole ordeal. My kitchen renovation fund was decimated. I would be cooking on a hot plate until 2028. The new countertops were a distant dream, but as I watched Sal's truck drive away, hauling the bells back to whatever metallurgical purgatory they came from, I didn't feel poor. I felt rich. I felt like a king who had spent the treasury to defend the kingdom and had emerged victorious. The tower was gone. The concrete pad remained, a gray scar on the driveway, a monument to what once stood there, a memorial to the Battle of the Bells. I swept the dust off the porch. Then I went inside and retrieved it, the bamboo wind chime. It was humble. It was cheap. It was made in a factory where quality control was a suggestion, not a rule. I walked to the hook, the same hook where this whole war began. I hung it up. I sat down in my rocking chair with a fresh cup of coffee. I waited. A breeze came through, a gentle, suburban zephyr. Clack, tink, clack. It was soft. It was woody. It was legally binding. I saw the curtains move in Brenda's house. I saw her face appear. She looked at the chimes. I saw her eyes twitch. I saw her mouth open, the reflex to complain rising in her throat like bile. Then she stopped. She remembered the treaty. She remembered the bells. She remembered the shark. She closed the curtains. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like justice. Sal texted me an hour later. "Sal, just scrapped the steel, kept one of the smaller bells, put it on my truck. Thinking of using it as a horn. You're a legend, Dave. Call me if you need a moat." I chuckled. A moat. Now there was an idea. I pulled out my phone and opened Amazon. I wasn't done. The treaty said I couldn't use heavy metallurgical percussion. It said nothing about lawn ornamentation. I typed into the search bar. Item, pink plastic lawn flamingo, 50-pack. Quantity, 200. I hit add to cart. I looked at the empty concrete pad where the tower used to be. It looked lonely. It needed color. It needed a flock. Brenda hated pink. I leaned back, listening to the bamboo chimes singing their little song of freedom. Clack, clack, tink. The war was over. But the occupation? The occupation was just beginning.